Hi again, everybody. I'm Juliette Strong from Pendo, and welcome to today's webinar. We are really excited to be here today talking about the digital learning experience, including how that's evolved over recent months and looking at what's coming next. Before I introduce you to your Pendo host today, I'm just going to cover off a quick couple of housekeeping points. Please feel free to use the chat function to share your ideas throughout the session. We're going to be monitoring this and we'd love to hear from you. So give us your views on what you're seeing in your own role at the moment, what you're seeing in the industry, and also your comments on what you're hearing during the discussion. If you have any difficulties at all during the session in terms of the visual or the audio content, then you can let us know through the chat function too. We will be having a Q&A session at the end of today's session, so please log any questions that you'd like to put to our presenters in the Q&A pane, and we will try and get through as many of these as possible at the end of the session. We will be recording all the content today, and so we'll make sure that we send you a link to that in the next day or so. So to get us started, please let me introduce you to your host today, Pendo's Chief Product Officer, Brian Crofts.
Awesome. Well, great to be here with you guys. Excited. I'm actually personally very excited for this webinar because I'm actually looking to learn, not just host, but to learn from Marcus and Eric and from you in terms of some kind of big themes and some kind of during some really interesting, unprecedented times, especially in e-learning and ed technology and all that stuff. So in terms of me, I'm the Chief Product Officer at Pendo. Been at Pendo for a while, and we're in this great position to work with a lot of different types of businesses, and it's been interesting, and we'll share a little data, but it's been interesting to see just from a pure product analytics usage perspective in terms of how different industries and different companies have either really thrived and some that not so much in terms of just sheer volume in terms of events. So I have a long background in product and so looking forward to this discussion. And then Marcus and Eric, if you guys want to introduce yourselves.
Sure. So I'm Marcus Fields. I'm co-founder of SchoolCloud. We make school operation software that manages things like parent-teacher conferences, parents' evenings, school clubs, trips, and room and resource scheduling. I actually started the company back in 2006 when I was still a high school student in a school in Scotland. That turned into a full-time business, and we now have over 4,000 schools worldwide that rely on our products day in, day out. Especially recently during this pandemic, we launched an innovative video conferences feature, and since then I've had over 50 million minutes worth of video consultations take place so far in the past few months.
Awesome.
Yeah, and Brian, I'll jump in too here. Eric Swanson, Vice President of Practice and Instruction Products at Renaissance Learning. Renaissance Learning is a leading provider of benchmark and interim assessments and our STAR assessments, as well as an instruction partner with Mayan, Freckle, and Schoolzilla products in the instructional space for grades K through 12. Been in edtech for quite a while, the last 15 years or so, and really working on instructional products, practice products, you name it. And it's been great for the last couple of years to be with Renaissance. And just, yeah, thanks to the Pendo team for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, Eric, thanks. Great to be here. And Marcus, I would say, I wish I could say that I started the business that I'm now running like when I was in high school. So kudos to you. That's great. Well, cool. Well, let's jump in. I wanted to kind of set the stage before we jump into some Q&A and hear more from Marcus and Eric, and also to Julie's point, just hear from the audience, like some of the things that they're seeing, some of the ideas. Like this is definitely meant to be as much as us three are talking, it's definitely as much as we can be collaborative and have a conversation. But just pull out a few just headlines. Whether it's ed tech is no longer an adoption. Digital transformation is the kind of the bigger, broader conversation, but ed tech specifically, on a personal note, I have 4 daughters, and they are all in school, and they're all starting the year. They ended the year remote, and they're starting the year remote. And so, as a parent, and with my spouse, we're very concerned about what this means, how it'll affect the behaviors of our, how it'll impact the educational quality. What does it mean in terms of collaboration and working with other students? And so we have a lot of questions, but the biggest point is that it's no longer an option. Schools are quickly, moving, whether it's, universities, whether it's elementaries, nursery schools, like they're all trying to figure this out. And so it's a really big topic. So next slide. Now, this is also interesting. Now, the purple one, you might go, is that ed tech? No, that's actually real estate. And I actually can't explain that specifically. I'm not a real estate guy, but man, they had a really good 3 weeks. And then they've kind of normalized maybe a bit. But one of the things that you see in terms of, I think the obvious ones are like, any type of collaboration tools. I know that we at Pendo, our use of collaboration tools, whether it's Zoom, things like, online whiteboarding solutions, the way we design, everything that we do is collaborative online. So any type of thing there is, you're going to see I think a continued spike there. And then of course, the one that we're talking today around EdTech, like you see not only a spike that happened in late March, because that's when all schools were kind of closing and starting to move digitally, but you can see a sustained spike until about, I guess this would be about when schools are starting to move into summer. And so I'd imagine that spike to jump significantly to start of the school year. So interesting data there. Let's see, and then just a couple other, I guess, context setting slides. Really kind of the same thing. Again, this speaks to kind of the when COVID hit, which was about mid-March, and just the growth that we're seeing during those April and May, and then slowing down during the summer. So, and then, one thing that, not specifically to EdTech, this is more of a, if you're a CEO or a head of product or any of those types of roles, this is something interesting to think about, as we build our strategies and our roadmaps going forward. And obviously, Marcus and Eric, I want to get your perspective on this as we talk today. But, one kind of product leader perspective during this time are these questions in my mind, which is, what are the stakes of not being strategically nimble right now? Well, it's pretty damn high, right? Like if you're not able to take in new data and understand the market and how it changes overnight, and you are kind of this slow moving, battleship to something that, is not agile, that the stakes are high. The next thing is should allocation of resources remain consistent? During this market, probably not. Again, we might need to shift our resources to other areas and disproportionately invest based on what's happening. And then the last one is, even if we have these new priorities for the next month, the following month, how confident that they actually stay, and it's not very. And so there's this kind of product and leadership perspective that I think we really need to embrace, not only in EdTech, but really across all technology companies, and just stay agile, stay flexible. Don't be beholden to a roadmap that you set back in January. That roadmap is probably wrong. Those resource allocations, those investments that you had planned at the beginning of the year could be just accelerated or wrong. And so I wanted to share one last quick slide before we jump into the conversation, just to kind of give you an idea of for us, how did we think about it? And these are actually kind of old slides. I mean, to the points ahead, we're continuing to be agile and nimble based on new data that we have. But, for us, we looked at what are the critical market trends that we need to focus on, and it's really kind of focused, kind of moved from growth to retention. We wanted better reach and better scale during this time. And so we kind of have this idea of this initial roadmap that we had, and I'm not going to go into the specifics here, but kind of this initial roadmap, and then our new Q2 roadmap, which had a significant change, from quarter to quarter, or from what we planned to what we executed against, in a much more of a significant way than we had in past. So that's just a plug to say, keep thinking, keep looking at data, staying close to your customers, and continuing to stay agile and nimble with your resource allocation, your strategy, and your product roadmap. So hopefully that resonates. I think, we're much further along into this. And so I think we've all seen kind of things that we've done well, in our respective companies, and things that we could have done better. And so the idea here, as we kind of shift more to the panel discussion, is to hear from some leaders that are in these specific areas, about what's top of their mind, and how are they seeing this play out for them, especially in edtech. And so again, I'm not only asking questions because I've been asked to host this, but I'm asking questions because I'm actually really excited to learn. And I'm thinking about my kids, and I'm thinking about my friends, and just the whole educational system and how that's going to change. And so, excuse me. So let's jump right in. And it kind of goes with kind of the narrative that I've been following in this last couple slides. But for you, Marcus and Eric, specifically, and Marcus, I'll start with you if that's okay.
Sure.
But the question that that we have here is, if you think about your business, your product, your platform, what would you highlight in terms of what has changed, as a result of this pandemic?
Sure. Well, as one of the co-founders, one of the areas of the business I look after on a day-to-day basis is the product side. So I effectively wear the product manager hat here at SchoolCloud. And we have had a very significant change to our product. And had we not done that, I think our business might be suffering today. So us acting very quickly and launching this new feature, I think, has had a profound impact. So a little bit of background. One of our main products in the US is called Meet the Teacher. Across the pond in the United Kingdom, it's called SchoolCloud Parents Evening. It's an online platform, a scheduling tool for parent-teacher conferences. So here at SchoolCloud, we believe that the parental involvement in a child's education is really important. And at these parent-teacher conferences, the parents need to schedule a time to meet with their child's teachers. And in the world where we find ourselves in now, obviously people aren't leaving their houses to go into school to congregate in this one area and have a parent-teacher conference. So effectively, schools either couldn't use our products, not that they had no need for it, because schools still wanted to hold conferences, and they were scrambling to find ways to do so, trying to communicate between parents and teachers by email or picking up the phone, all these various methods of communication that weren't particularly optimal. Meanwhile, you find lots of businesses starting to really go for video conferencing. Zoom meetings like this became widely popular. And I remember being at a trade show probably 3-4 years ago, and out the blue, someone looked at our stand. They saw that our booth said online parent-teacher conference scheduler, and they mistook that for a virtual conference, holding these conferences online. And we thought, oh, that's like quite a nice suggestion, nice feature, but it wasn't our product. So we kind of left that in the back burner. And when we heard that schools aren't going to be operating as they used to in the past, we remembered back to that one person that asked about holding a virtual parent-teacher conference all those years ago. And we saw this as an opportunity to experiment and just clear a roadmap and just pretty much overnight focus on building this new functionality. and that's been really instrumental in keeping the whole company busy during this time. It's given purpose to our development team to build products that are genuinely useful and being used and loved by schools. As I mentioned, since launching this in May, there've been over 15 million minutes worth of virtual meetings that have taken place, and we've had a huge amount of unsolicited positive feedback from schools because of it. So that's kept our sales team going and our support team going. And I guess an important point to make is we offered our services for free during this time while schools are facing difficulty, because we want to be there for our customers and other schools worldwide to help them get through this difficult time.
No, that's great. I love the insight around, it's not just about creating the educational environment between teacher and student, but also how do you enable the parents to be involved in as well? Because we all know that that's kind of the trifecta, right? That relationship between the student, the teacher, and then the parent, and then being involved. And I'll admit, as we've been involved now and I don't want to make this too personal, but as in my experience that I've seen, it's like, that's the thing that's still a little bit missing. Like, I don't really understand what's going on as much as I used to when it was kind of more of a normal situation. So I think it's a great thing to tackle. And so, yeah, Eric, do you want to, I'm sure you guys have, specifically different things that you guys have done in the wake of the pandemic, and would love to hear that as well. So.
For sure, and in a lot of ways, a lot of what Marcus said is similar in terms of theme, right? A couple of the things that we focused a lot here at Renaissance, being a really mission-driven company, right? We believe very strongly that all students should have equal opportunity to grow and engage in learning and the learning process. And this has given us an opportunity to further that mission, right? And so making sure that we can provide equity and access to our products, and also help understand growth in different ways. And so I'll jump into each of those for just 1 second. But in terms of equity and access, we've opened up a lot of our products, most of our products, for free to a lot of communities, to certain countries, to certain programs, given free trials like we haven't necessarily in the past, because we really want to make sure that those students who are at home, students who are in certain situations, have access to great reading materials, great math materials, great engaging books and quizzes and activities that they can use to further their education, their passion, their experiences. And it's really flipped, right? So if we think about what that means from a product management perspective, we'll get into that in a little bit, just in terms of how we made some of those decisions and how we changed some of our licensing models and reporting and things like that. But from a business model perspective, right, really making sure that customers get a chance to experience Renaissance, see what Renaissance can do for them in their at-home environments. And it's been a great opportunity to really talk about all of our great products. The other piece is growth, right? And so customers come to Renaissance to help understand student growth, right? That is really the value proposition of STAR, our primary assessment product. And so giving them additional data, additional context, really helping them understand what those students probably need to be working on while at home to grow and to meet their educational outcomes has been a big win as well. One of the things we've launched recently was really opening up what we call focus skills. So you can go to Renaissance right now and look at the focus skills for your student's grade level, the things that your student may want to work on or your child may need to work on, and get some ideas, right? And see those things that really are driving growth with their student cohorts within their state and within their kind of norm population. And so both of those things, right, opening up access, helping empower growth with additional context, are kind of the two big themes that really is a result of COVID. And I think it's going to make us a better company long term.
No, that's great. I just to echo kind of that last statement right there, these are challenging times for sure. I mean, I'm not gonna, pontificate and kind of share too many of my thoughts on that, but it's like, I do think fundamentally, like this is an opportunity for us to get better, especially on like the on the things that we control, like, for example, building a better product, building a better experience. Let me go off script for a minute and ask a question. Like, what are you guys most worried about in terms of, look, you guys are in the business of helping, whether it's, different people and different environments get educated. Like, what are you guys, like, when you think about your technology and the products you're building and the business you're building, like, what are you guys like worried about? What are you worried about that at the end of the day, like, what technology can't solve, or what you haven't built yet? Like, what's your biggest worry, given the education of children and obviously at the university levels is so important? Like, what are you guys worried about?
You want to go, Marcus? You want me to?
Feel free to kick us off, Eric.
I talked about it a little bit. My biggest worry is access of our products. If you look at edtech over the last 15 to 20 years, frankly, it's been used by a small percentage of educators, a small percentage of students. That's growing, right? You see a lot of engaging applications, additional devices in the household, within the schools, that are starting to drive some of those things. But in terms of really using that as a platform for primary educational opportunities, it's still in the subset. And really having strong edtech implementations drive the majority of the classroom experience, right? Let's be frank, right? It's still in the minority pre-COVID. That huge change, right? To go from, a small double-digit percentages of classrooms using those tools on a regular basis to almost all schools using some form of educational product is quite drastic, right? And so for me, it's really about getting those students to get access to our products, and then the fidelity of that implementation, right? Getting the teachers the right goals, getting teachers the right training, getting them the right supports, helping them understand what may need to change in terms of how they teach, how they engage their students, how they engage their parents, right? It's a whole evolution, right, of our education system that is hard, right? And we're all seeing in the front lines, right, in terms of how people are using our products differently.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point, which is like, there's not this kind of organic product adoption growth curve that we learn in business schools, right? It's this, macroeconomic, these external forces coming, and they're accelerating in an almost unnatural way, this adoption. Now, what about, and maybe Marcus, you could, if you want to chime in on that too, but like, one of the things I'm worried about, like, what are you guys seeing also in terms of like socioeconomic, differences, right? Because, the unfortunate thing with COVID is you start to potentially see a greater divide between like socioeconomic classes of people based on their access to technology. And so obviously the things that you guys are offering are technology based, but how do you factor in and solve for people that don't have the access to technology? Is there stuff that your companies are doing, or are you more relying on the state and local governments and federal governments to help with that?
So I think for us, I think jumping back slightly, the thing that worries me most is just ensuring that our products are still meeting the needs of schools today, because what is the needs of a school today is going to be very different tomorrow in the start of the academic year, when we might be moving towards this type of hybrid learning environment where some students are learning at home and others in school. And our motto really is to make school operations simple, or rather complex school operations simple. So it's our role, or my role as the product manager, to really think about how these processes work day to day, and obviously they're changing now, and then adapting our products quite rapidly to meet the needs. In terms of access to technology, touching on the product that I was mentioning before, which is this interaction between parents and teachers. So some schools are using this for their traditional parent-teacher conferences, others using it for review meetings, catch-up meetings, because now there's a lot of homeschooling going on, and the parent is wanting to check in with the teacher, or vice versa. one of the things that really drove us early on is trying to make the product available to as many people as possible. So trying to remove as many device restrictions, trying to make the product work across many devices. So for example, in our case, we specifically built the product around working just through a web browser. So there isn't an app to download because we didn't want to require people to have a certain standard of device. Well, I guess the thing that we built is a video conferencing solution, and so you do need some form of microphone at minimum. We can't get past without a microphone, but the thing is, most people nowadays do have a smartphone. Even in the underprivileged areas, you find most people do have access to a smartphone. So as long as they have a smartphone, they can utilize the product. They don't need a camera. But we did notice, for example, not just a split between economic circumstances, but different generations and different people have different
technical acumen.
Exactly, and so we find certain like older teachers traditionally in the past wouldn't engage with technology, but they've now, like us all, found themselves in a world where, you know, everyone is starting to use video conferencing. You know, I have older members of my family that in the past wouldn't have dreamed of going on Zoom, yet do so now. So if anything, the situation has brought around maybe an era of change where people are more open to trying technology because it's the best alternative to seeing people in person.
Got it. Do you guys mind if I bring up a couple Q&A questions from the audience, just to continue to engage them as well? You know, I have probably more questions and we have time, but let's bring, just to make sure everybody's getting value here. So this is from Alice to you guys, which
I was
is
just typing that one, Brian, to Alice back so I can jump in quick with the,
yeah, I thought maybe it would be nice to just speak to it because it'd be probably more efficient. But this is Alice Little, and again, thanks for the question. We'll get through these. It says, love the insight around offering free or trial instances of your products during these uncertain times. How would you transitioning these to paid users, especially with the possibility of future lockdowns? In other words, like, and I totally agree with this, like, yeah, short term, it feels viable. It really increases adoption, exposure to your products, but like, yeah, what about long term? It's not necessarily a viable long term. So how do you start to converting these into like to future paying customers, given, you know, the uncertainty around how long this is going to last? So either one of you guys can take this. I guess Eric.
I'll jump in really quick. So what I was just typing to Alice was it changed two things for us. One, we got a lot more aggressive in terms of how our account management model focused around that. And so what do I mean by that? Really changing the roles and responsibilities of an account manager in terms of, you know, new customer growth and new sales opportunities, to go from true prospecting to using analytics and customer usage and product growth to help them understand the value of the long-term usage of a product like Renaissance, whether it's a Freckle product or Mayan or Accelerated Reader or AR, right? They are having their teachers, their students, their parents engage with those applications, and we can go to them and show them how those things are meeting their particular goals and needs. And so just being able to have that data up front, right? Whether it's Pendo data, right? Not to get too kitschy, but, or other internal reporting data, right? That's been great. To the point of the, you know, future lockdowns and potentially cutting off access, we do try and give a lot more flexibility depending on the situation, right? Depending on the region, the state, the particular engagement that they have. And really work with that customer, right? We don't want to leave them high and dry if they have a great successful implementation. That's not going to happen, right? They need a couple more months, but we do, right? We're still a business, right? We still want to work them toward kind of a long-term sustainable model where they get the necessary training and they get the necessary coaching and supports, and they get the full value of these products over the long haul. So there is consistency of implementation. That's the other big one that is hard right now, right? You talk about challenges, Brian, which is, you know, you have a lot of schools trying a lot of different things, right? So it's up to us, our account management team, our customer success team, to go in and work with those schools that see great success with our products, help them understand that value and how they can use it to show year-over-year growth, month-over-month growth, right? And create some consistency for their students, their parents, communities, et cetera.
Got it. Got it. Great. I know, and hopefully, Alice, that answers your question. I think that made a lot of sense to me. And let's ask one more. And I think, Marcus, this would be a good one for you, since you kind of touched on kind of not just like socioeconomic differences, but also difference in generation. And so from Liz Feller, it says, what strategies have you seen work well in helping the older generation of educators who still prefer paper and pen for everything? And before you answer this, one anecdote. Literally last night, I was talking with a friend whose mother is in education, and she's 64, and she had one more year before she was going to retire. And she saw all the technology and all this wave of new things, and she's like, I'm out. I was like, I think this is a perfect time to retire, because like all these different widgets, and I don't know what she called them, like phone things, like she's like, I just think it's probably, this is where I will step aside. And so it is interesting, like, she kind of felt like that was overwhelming, so she stepped aside. But there's also obviously a lot of people in maybe an older generation that are still going to be in the system. And so, yeah, Marcus, if you could share some thoughts on that.
Sure. I think it comes down to trying to make things as intuitive as possible and as seamless as possible for new people to pick up and use your product. So it doesn't really matter what product or service it is, trying to make it very simple to get started. So I guess it depends if you're the sort of product that teachers just pick up and are supposed to use for their classroom. We know a lot of products are like that. Here at SchoolCloud, things are more on a school or district level. And so we work with someone at the school who, hopefully is okay with technology to implement it. For example, we would strongly advocate where possible and where it's applicable for your product, is doing things like integrating with the student information system, pulling in all the data so that it's as little touch as possible for the end user, and trying where possible to go for single sign-on so that it's not another login that someone needs to access a product. So we try and make it seamless as possible for new users to start using it. So if you are a teacher, making it one click to get onto the product, and trying to really focus the what's on screen to just what matters. I think we've moved away from having pages that are really complex with having lots of information on screen. Yes, it might be pretty to look at all these graphs and charts, but we have to think as product people in the minds of the user that's going to be using the product. So we put ourselves in the mind of a teacher and think, what do they need to see? What's most important to them? And we build the product around what that teacher needs to see at that time.
Great.
Where time allows, in the future, we hope to use tools like Pendo to help onboard users better, and gain analytics and see where people are clicking on, what features are interacting with, to further refine the screen as time goes on.
Well, Marcus, we welcome that. But no, so there are more questions. I'm gonna go to kind of our set of questions, but I'll keep integrating some of these questions from the audience. So please continue to ask. I think what Eric and Marcus are providing is super helpful. So this was one of my favorite questions, which is, because I'm always, as a guy that builds software, I'm always interested in like how to build software or new products or experiences that actually change people's behavior, because that's the hardest thing to do. Now, in this situation, people are forced to change their behavior, but I'm curious, just like if I think about students and teachers, how have they changed their behavior? And, what have you done to maybe support that change, but also maybe help enable that change? What resistance are you seeing? And maybe what surprises that you've had when you're thinking about this change in behavior that is now required for both students and teachers and parents?
Yeah, and I can jump in there, and I'm going to pair it a little bit, because I think it's almost the same answer for a question you asked earlier about just access for lower socioeconomic students or populations, right? The two big pieces that we've pushed on are mobile usage, right? It goes to Marcus's comment around access and making things simple and easy. So a huge focus of some of our products like Freckle, some other reporting solutions. We really wanted to make sure that they can use it, frankly, on any device, right? In the old world, yes, mobile's important, but in a lot of educational institutions, right, they're still using general computers and Chromebooks and standard technology like iPads. But now with the at-home situation, especially those lower socioeconomic populations, they often only have access to a single phone, or a single smaller smart screen device. And so really making sure that things adjust and change and are accessible and work well for lower screen resolutions has been a big push for us. And it's also helped some of those more resistant users of technology. So teacher who's maybe a little more resistant, maybe isn't so resistant to pulling it up on their phone and checking out certain recommendations or checking out certain opportunities for their learners. The other big one is we pushed a big project around lower bandwidth. And so making sure students can access books and resources with lower bandwidth requirements, right? Or even offline, so that they can download resources when they have internet access and access those things offline at a later date. Both of those pieces have helped and responded to, right, the change behavior that you asked to, but also helped the lower socioeconomic status students who maybe can't afford really high speed, super quick bandwidth. So
yeah, and I think that's the challenge is like, when there is this like kind of macroeconomic or world pandemic event, like the reality is there are different economic situations. Not every student has equal opportunities, and so that's where it seems like this is where the challenge is. Like, yes, it's great in terms of your business that there's this acceleration, but when you're thinking all the different kind of segments or cohorts of people, it's very different. So I like the idea of thinking about how do you enable and help student behavior and parent behavior change based on those different kind of cohorts, or call them segments or whatever, of people with different circumstances. So super helpful. Marcus, anything you want to add to that, or we'll go to...
Sure. I mean, I guess this is taking a slightly different angle to the question. So, what have some of the things we've done that's changed, user behavior? Very specific to our scenario, I know that perhaps this resonates with anyone that's watching. Parent-teacher conferences, historically known to overrun. People just keep talking, and that makes the next person's start time a bit later. And before you know it, everything's running out of sync. Our scheduling software helps a lot in schools. We have a way of staggering breaks between each appointment for the parents, so that someone should be waiting at the door and it's nice and efficient. But inevitably, humans being humans would still talk. So we took this opportunity. We like efficiency. We're a software company at the end of the day. And in the virtual world, appointment times can't overrun. Obviously this Zoom call, it can overrun, but the way we built our system intentionally is that your appointment is this 5 or 10 or 50-minute slot, whatever it might be set. And after that, you will be moved on to your next teacher. And so we've been able to, I guess, change user behavior, and that they know, and it's clear there's a countdown, that they are speaking with this person for 5, 10, 50 minutes, however long it may be. And it means that parents are finishing on time and teachers are finishing on time. And we've had a lot of positive feedback from both parents and teachers that the parent-teacher conference or the review meetings, whatever it may be, in their mind has felt a lot more efficient, and it's actually started and finished when it was supposed to. And a lot of schools are actually asking us, like, how can we incorporate this going forward if we eventually return to being in person?
Yeah, that's actually a great point, which is like, if we somehow sometime soon start to move to, the quote new normal, what are some of the practices that we were working, or using during the pandemic that we'd actually like to incorporate? Because I know both personal and professional lives, there's things that have actually been quite, they've been a bit more proficient, and we should now, so if anything, it's just the adoption that was supposed to be a bit more organic is now just being accelerated by these external events. So Great. So I'm curious, and you guys have maybe touched on this a little bit, but I'm curious, just as a product person, I'm curious, like, what's the maybe single biggest change in roadmap, kind of going back to the idea of, staying nimble and agile. I'm curious, like, what, as you've talked to your teams, engineering, product, like what's the biggest kind of pivot or change that you've asked them to embrace and to accelerate?
Yeah, and I can jump in there quick. So there's, a couple of things I already spoke about in terms of bandwidth and mobility and a few things like that. I won't rehash those. A couple of the other ones, a couple of our products, our STAR assessment product, our accelerated reader product, and a few others have typically been district implementation products because of the stakes of the data that comes out of those products, right? They're used for growth measures, they're used for benchmarking, they're used for reading comprehension and reading programs. And so what we've done a lot over the past several months as we've watched this change is figured out ways to enable those products to be securely used outside of the school environment. And so working with proctoring organizations, putting additional security protocols in place, putting additional metrics and understanding for what students are doing and how they're doing it has been a big part of that. On the flip side of that, it is the data. So a lot of our states, a lot of our customers, we're even seeing legislation in this regard, are requesting more and different types and more detailed types of data so that they understand student engagement, student growth, and different activities like that. And so if you think about the additional two big pieces, it's, just the virtual access, the at-home access for our products, putting those measures in place. And then the second piece is just really doubling down on data connections to outside systems, whether it's a state data warehouse, a school data warehouse, or enhancing a lot of our reports with a slightly different context in mind, right? With a context of a parent, context of a slightly different educator group or population, slightly different student population, and slightly different goals that they have from a tracking perspective. So those are two big other roadmap changes.
Yeah, got it. So I'm curious, like, on the flip side then, what was the biggest, like, most painful thing that you guys eliminated from the roadmap or deprioritized that you were maybe excited about?
Yeah, go ahead, Marcus.
Sure. So we were gearing up for a brand new product launch. Actually, it had been about a year and a half in the making, and earlier this year in January at BET, one of the largest edtech shows worldwide, we launched our new product, which is called SchoolCloud Clubs and Events. Everything around managing clubs, trips, extracurricular activities, and so on. And we had been communicating with customers, with our schools for a good number of months now, targeting a launch date, and we were launching in May, in the height of the pandemic. So, that got really thrown up in the air. We found a lot of our schools were using part of our product that was due to be migrated over to the new product for really key things during lockdown, especially here in the UK. A lot of our schools were using part of our product to manage which students were still coming into school for care. And what we didn't want to do was migrate them to this new product that they would be unfamiliar with on a skeleton staff in the height of the pandemic. So it was something our whole team was excited about, launching this new product that we've been gearing up for months and months, communicating with customers. And for us, that's probably our biggest change. We have still carried on with it somewhat, but we should have been fully migrated everyone over to the new product. That's not the case now. We're still trying to target it over these school holidays. But yeah, for us, that was the biggest change. But we're glad we did it. We don't want to be putting undue pressure on schools.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And so great answers both. I was going to say I was just going to go to the Q&A. So this is from Liz. She says, do you find that it's better to provide integrations with other software solutions or develop your own additional features to your existing service? So kind of classic, build by partner question, as And I think it's a really appropriate question because you're now starting to operate under a more, a quicker timeline. And so, at least in my perspective, anytime you do integrations, or, those are typically things you don't feel like you need to own, but they're critical to the workflow, or when you, acquire things, it's just to accelerate the roadmap. So I'm curious, Eric, we can start with you if that's okay. Just like, what do you think about kind of build, buy, partner approach during this kind of intense, accelerated product building time?
Yeah, I love it because Liz, I feel like you were literally reading my mind as I was writing some notes to myself. To be perfectly candid and frank, it's been pretty frenetic from a product management perspective, right? We've had to do all three. And so it really did accelerate some of our evaluation of certain acquisition opportunities as an organization to fill some of those particular needs. It also accelerated and frankly reinforced our strategy around what we call the Renaissance Growth Alliance. So if any of you are curious, you can go out to the page, check that out, and where we partner with over 140 different educational companies in the space to make sure that our customers' data, our customer outcomes are met, full stop. And so we'll share data if it's, obviously legal and appropriate to follow those, contractual obligations and things like that. But if they want us to send their data to a particular partner, an SIS system, a reporting system, another educational provider to help ensure effective placement of students, we do all of those things. And we've gotten a number of new partners on board to help facilitate those things. One of the big partnerships we're launching this summer is a partnership with Clever. So Clever is a rostering partner. For a long time, Renaissance had been a little shy at going full in with Clever, but they're a great partner for us. They really help, empower and enable some of those things around access for students, especially younger populations, and ensure consistency of student identities within the system. On top of that, right, we've doubled down in building new features, right, as well. And so we have the acquire, we have the partner, and we have, like we talked about, refocused a lot of our investment opportunities in a couple of different areas to ensure access and equity in the home. So I know that's not probably a perfect answer for you, Liz, but it goes to show that our teams have been working overtime, right? Really trying to jump into meet all of those customer needs, right? We really pride ourselves at Renaissance on meeting the needs of our customers. So if they want us to work with someone or they want a feature, right, we really try and prioritize those things first and foremost.
Great. Marcus, anything to add? If not, I'm going to jump to another panel question.
I think just to say that, again, depends on the circumstance. Sometimes it is best to partner with others. At SchoolCloud, we really believe in focusing on doing a few things really well, as opposed to doing lots of things, but just so. So that has led to a number of partners. We also make use of Clever for integration with SIS, for example. So depends on the scenario.
Got it. Any, do you guys spend any time looking at like any M&A type stuff, like stuff that maybe, or I guess maybe it's the most expensive time to do M&A in your space because all these products and services are spiking right now. So who knows? Well, cool. So there's another question from Hanny. It says, she says, or he said, I'm not sure. Does Marcus or Eric have a feel for the extent to which teachers and schools are confident to continue with more technology, for example, compared to, or in other words, compared to this time last year? Has it changed, evolved behaviors in the long term, and how are they planning for this? So I'll let either one of you jump in.
I'm happy to jump in if you want to go, Marcus, first.
No, on you go, Eric.
Okay. I think, not to get too philosophical or existential for the group this morning, but I do think it's one of those situations where we don't know how much we will have learned in this time without a little kind of retrospective glance. And so what do I mean by that? Well, we have so many teachers jumping in with both feet, using these products, using these opportunities to engage with ed tech and new data tools and new platforms and new technologies. And it's really overwhelming, right? So in the moment, they maybe feel uncertain. They maybe feel like this isn't the way to go long-term. They maybe feel like it's not really going to be in the best interest of their students. But I think until we put a little perspective on it, right? 6 months, a year, right? A full school cycle, and look back and interview those same teachers, you know, they might regress a little bit from where they are today in terms of technologies, and I expect that to happen. But I think the things that that we will all learn, right? We're learning in real time. The things that really do have value for the broader student population and for all learners across the world will be neat and distinct, and those things will continue to grow. And so it's one of those, you know, maybe feels uncertain in the moment, but all of a sudden it's going to be several months from now, and these teachers are going to be running fully confident and ready to engage in new ways.
Yeah, I mean, I can't agree more. It's like, you know, one thing humans do really well is adapt,
right?
Especially, you know, especially when it's the benefit of, let's say, our children and their education or our own education. Like, I frankly see not just a spike, but just a continued hyper increase or increased focus on this area of in terms of this space, technology. And at the end of the day, hopefully it's better education, better experiences, and better technology to be able to really support kind of this new world that we'll be living in for probably quite some time, if not indefinitely. So. Right. Marcus, anything to add?
No, other than I think it's a great question. I think anyone, or at least we would probably assume that teachers will be more comfortable with technology. I mean, they are having to use it, but perhaps the answer may depend on what technology the teacher's been asked to do. Like, for example, personally, I have a sister who is a primary teacher, and you know, I've seen firsthand at her going from planning lessons on word and paper and delivering them in a classroom to somehow having to deliver these lessons virtually, and it's been a frustration for her. You know, I've had a lot of phone calls and asking for help. How do I work this? How do I make the product do X, Y, or Z? So I think as long as we can deliver products that don't frustrate users, then I think they'll be comfortable taking on more technology, or they'll feel comfortable continuing using the system. So I think we as product people have to really tread carefully and try and introduce features slowly, intuitively, and not you know, cause any roadblocks for users.
That's actually a really great point, which is there's probably this really important balance between accelerating your roadmap, putting more engineers on things, you know, working more hours to get more products out. But there is some sort of like adoption curve, you know what I mean, that you can't necessarily beat. Like, I know sometimes when we release features too often, because we're always like, we have a lot of ideas, we have a good engineering team, we want to keep putting out new experience, new features, functionality, all that stuff. But there is a kind of rate at which you can consume these new experiences, right? So I imagine that there is kind of a thoughtful balance of like, are we overwhelming them with new functionality, or, you know, do we need to just spend more time onboarding and getting them comfortable with what they have before we advance it? And so yeah, really good things, I think, to think about, especially if you're in product and you're thinking about your roadmap. So I'm curious. I can kind of imagine the answer here, but curious, when you think about educational providers versus the students, what I would imagine that the adoption of technology and things like that is much more natural and more kind of welcome on the student side. But how would you kind of think about or categorize or articulate the difference between the two sides of the platform, the educators and the education providers and the students? Like, what do you see kind of both as positives and concerns on both sides of the platform?
Yeah, students are, like you said, students are pretty malleable, right? They might not love it in all situations, right? It's still homework, it's still schoolwork in some regard that they have to go through. The thing that, you know, those that know me well will hear me say this a lot. It's really all about fidelity of implementation. And so even getting educators to use our products isn't necessarily the difficult steep hill to climb. What is making sure that the district has a particular goal for using the product so that they understand after the period of time, whether it's a month, whether it's a quarter, whether it's a year, 2 years, they can see how their implementation has worked or not worked and things that they may need to change. And so it's the kind of the multivariable analysis of looking back at this spring semester and understanding like, hey, what worked, what didn't work? How do we as a district, how do we as an educational provider know and isolate best practices and make sure that our teachers have the supports they need and understood how to use these various products in ways that would be best. And so we're working a lot with our training team, our customer success team, to really help empower teachers with the necessary information without, to your point, overloading them. And that's the tricky part, right there. That's a lot of art there, just as much as science.
Well, I like what you're saying, which is like, given kind of the pace in which change is required, I think you would have to match the amount of and kind of the frequency in which you do retrospectives, right? To your point, like, 2 weeks in, what's working, what's not, 3 weeks later, what's working, what's not. And so you almost kind of have to, I would imagine, match that pace or that frequency with the speed of development and the needs that, I would imagine you're getting, as you get more and more people at scale using these systems, you're going to get so much feedback, so many insights. And so there'll be this constant need to reflect, do retrospectives, and to continually stack rank and the priorities based on all the learnings and insights. So it's this really accelerated time for probably your product. And so super interesting. Now, Marcus, before you jump in, if you wanted to share some thoughts on this, I just wanted to say we have 2 minutes left roughly. And so Marcus, if you want to make a comment, if not, we'll open it up just to see if there's any one or two more questions we can answer. So Marcus.
No, I think good. If we've got any more questions, we can try and help some other viewers.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think some of the biggest add value can be when people have specific questions about their situations that you guys can provide insights on. So yeah, like within the last 2 minutes, any questions that people, don't be shy, any questions that people are it can be very specific to your business. And these guys can provide some insights. If not, and we can kind of wait to see if anybody opens up with a question, but maybe just in the last minute from each of you, just like some closing thoughts, like things that maybe we didn't cover that you think would be really great advice for the audience here that are obviously in ed tech and in education. Yeah.
Sure. I think from our side, I think us introducing this video meetings feature is something that we, as I said, got requested on the whim about 3-4 years ago at a trade show, and we thought, oh, it's a nice idea, nothing of it at the time. But this whole pandemic, this situation, we've gone, actually, this is an opportunity to where the world's effectively gone on pause for us to try something new. And even though we're relatively small 15-person team and consider ourselves fairly agile, we probably don't try new ideas and new features as often as we should. And this whole situation has taught us to be brave. If there's an idea that we feel has value, then we should just go ahead and try and do it and see what the reaction is. So I think closing thoughts would be, use the time, be brave.
Be brave. I love that. I love that. Yeah, Eric, closing thoughts here.
Yeah, I realize we're right at the top of the hour, so I'll try and be quick and quippy for you, which is, voice of customer, right? All of us as in product know that voice of customer is king in everything that we do. This is a time where that couldn't be more important, right? Really doing consistent interviews, surveys, customer outreach, looking at usage and analytics patterns for your products to really understand what users are doing, right? In this case, students and educators, so that we can respond more iteratively and quickly. that's what we're doing. We're spending much more time than we usually do, which is a lot in trying to gather that information. So it's been interesting but good.
Awesome. Eric, Marcus, thank you so much. There was one question not to be answered, except I'll answer it, which is, will you share the recording? And the answer is yes, we will be sharing this content with folks that haven't been able to watch all of it. So again, thank you guys. I thought it was super insightful. Not just me as a product guy, but me as a parent, just listening and hearing like people like you building the technology, listening to the customers, adapting, being agile as best you can be to make this most critical thing, which is education of our children, of all of us, something that we can do during this, again, unprecedented time of pandemic. So thank you both. Enjoy the rest of your days. Everyone, thanks for joining. And here's to a great next year. We're excited.
Thanks, Brian. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Yes.